Welcome to the Baloney Podcast.
What's up, y'all?
We are your host, Sean and Lanette Reed, and we are all about building families that leave legacies.
Yes.
We want to give you guys strategies for life because we want you to succeed. And today we're talking about maintaining your hope when situations look hopeless.
And this is specifically to young adults. We were talking about our kids and the things that they're going through and just kind of how things are different than what it used to be when we were their age.
Yeah, man, I could walk into any facility back in the day that I wanted to go into to get a job, and I could just go into the place. Didn't matter where it was, FedEx, UPS, whatever.
Yeah.
It didn't matter.
Well, you remember, like, you walked in, you asked for the manager.
Yep.
And then you were able to see and talk to the manager.
Yeah, whoever was going to do the hiring.
Yes.
We can walk right in.
And then you ask for application. Well, you ask if they're hiring.
Yep.
They were like, yes or no. And then if they are, they would hand you an application and you would fill that out. And
right
then
on
you
the spot.
Right on the spot. And then the approach to getting a job was you turn in the application, you wait a couple days, you call the organization or the company. You make your presence known. I could just keep showing up
and pestering you if you don't hire me. Come on.
And they would tell you if the position has been filled or not.
Yep.
Or if they just bypassed you for whatever reason.
Nowadays, you don't have that. A lot of people have jobs right now. You know, the percentage of unemployment is one of the lowest that it's ever been. But I don't think it's the quantity of jobs that's an issue right now. It's the quality of the ones that they have and the amount of pay versus how much right now inflation is, expenses are. Right now, there are a lot of people who are afraid that they would never have home ownership because they're in apartments right now and they can barely make ends meet, even though they have a job. So I think people are working. And there's this, I think it's a misunderstanding that this generation doesn't want to work hard.
Yeah. And of course, we've heard a lot of that, especially since 2020. There has been a lot that this generation simply does not want to work.
Yeah.
And I don't know very many people who don't want to work.
Yeah, I think we have people who, now we have seen it. We have seen some, but that's the exception to the rule. I think that what we have is a culmination of circumstances that present as people don't want to work.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me what the issue is, it's a feeling of failure that I think emits from the stereotypes of what success are being propagated as with social media, within entertainment, or even like a lot of these business gurus that a lot of people look up to. There's this idea that you got to be, in a certain type of car, you got to have a yacht, you got to be going on expensive trips to be living the life. You got to be making so much money.
And it's always in front of you, like, especially like with social media. Like as soon as you open the app, you are challenged with what society or what someone else, or like you said, what influencer is telling you what you should have.
Right.
And we didn't have that growing up.
No. Man.
Like the closest we had to influencers were people who were just in the music industry or entertainment.
Celebrities on
but you
television.
only saw them in magazines
and
television.
You may have aspired to be like them, but what your normal everyday experience was
the people around
you working, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that movie and music didn't influence culture in my day. I'm going to go so far as to say, I don't think we had the temptation or the level of shame that we will see now propagated through social media. What gets the most likes is what's most controversial.
Yeah.
What gets the most comments on a post is what's most critical or negative. So you have this very cynical society that's driving, your young adults. And when you're trying to establish your footing in life, you're experimenting, you're trying to figure it out. But one or two people, which are the exceptions to the rule, gain popularity either through becoming, an Instagram model, becoming famous because maybe they had a hit song or something like that, or started a business and it took off at just the right time. The moon lined up with the planet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that person did it. Maybe I can. This person made it with crypto. Maybe I can,
And honestly, that is not that's not the pathway to success.
Right.
That's like a 1 in a million, right? Or 2 in a million.
Or even the thing that they did to get it was so degrading or so bad. It's not a matter of skill. as much as it was a willingness to strip naked to get followers in some cases. And in some cases, it literally is hard work, genius innovation, great invention, and they made it big. But a lot of times what young people are looking at in comparison to where they are, and even some preaching, because we've heard some preaching in certain churches that portray this idea that if you ain't making a certain amount of money, then you're cursed. Or if you don't have a Bentley outside, then God ain't blessing you because you ain't got enough faith, all this stupid stuff. And so what that leaves a person in is this vacuum of like feeling like a failure.
Yeah, there's a lot of baloney out there.
Yes.
That people are believing, and they don't really have people around them to help them discover what's baloney, what works for them, what's a safe pathway, especially for young adults.
Yeah.
Because families just aren't together as they used to be back in the day. And so back in the day, not all, right? But for the most part, if you didn't have a mom, you had an aunt, or you had a grandma, or you had an uncle, pretty much somebody that you can go to.
Community, man.
Community. But you could go to that person, that pillar in your family, and really ask them like what their opinion is. Yeah. And right now, you don't have that a lot of times.
Well, you went back to COVID at the very beginning. What COVID did is it siloed humanity, right? So it put us in this position where we weren't together. We're not talking as much. So the main place that you did find community was where? It's back on social media. It's in a chat room.
So it just solidified like that isolation.
And then now what's pouring into you on a consistent basis is something you probably will never be. And in some ways, it's someone that you were never designed to be. Like God didn't create you to be that. But when you're bombarded with it, and it's like you have to be on, X, formerly known as Twitter. You got to be on Instagram. You got to be on TikTok. You got to be on blah, blah, blah. Then you're now, when we looked at some of the statistics of young adults and, people over 40 even, and you talk about how much time they spend on social media, you're looking at 3 to 4 hours a day. These are insane numbers. So like when a person could be talking to God about their future, dreaming and writing a vision for their lives, when they could be honing in on their craft and developing their skills, they're scrolling their life away. You got whole grown adults that spend, hours on video games trying to numb, the anxiety that they have because of the fact that they've accepted almost like a defeatist mentality that there is no hope, because if I'm going to make it, or since I can't be like those that I've been seeing, or since the job market is so difficult to get the right position, they've become so discouraged, and it becomes, well, I applied to 200 applications online and I still haven't been hired. And in my mind, I empathize with that. I understand it, because it's not how it was when I was getting hired back in the day. Yeah. I can go knock on the door. I can go meet some people. So my challenge to those who may be in that predicament where it's like your attention is really being drawn into a comparison model, just remember that comparison is the thief of joy, right? Because you're spending your time looking at what you're not instead of honing in and focusing in on who God says you are.
I think the challenge with that is we have a lot more options than we had when we were growing up. In other words, when I say options, I'm not talking about like the amount of jobs that were available back then versus right now, but I'm just talking about options are everywhere. And we usually opt for the outlets that aren't good for us. But back in the day, we didn't have a choice.
So you're talking about like things that are taking your attention?
Things that are taking our attention. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are options. And back in the day, we didn't have those options.
Yeah.
So it was, you did. I mean, you complained about work, but you didn't have the option to twiddle your thumbs or swipe all day long versus trying to find a job.
Yeah. So I think that right now it's a difficult season, especially for younger generations. I think even for older generations, because but the problem with the older ones is we were in this track of at least having a decent job. So some of us are kind of grandfathered into better opportunities. And I'm not trying to make light of anybody's situation where you may be trying to look for a job, or AI is taking over in your field, and now you're having to rediscover, your new trade or what it is that you're going to be doing. And I still think that in those particular cases, we have to make a conscious decision to say, I have to focus in on what God, and this is something you were talking about earlier, is what does God put in my hands?
Yes. So like what you have really is enough for where you are. Most of us don't really look down and say, okay, what do I have in my hand?
Right.
When we say, what do I have in my hand? We're talking about talents. We're talking about your abilities. We're talking about what makes you unique.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about your passions and your desires. So very, very simple concept. There are lots of cosmetologists out there today who have their own shop, their own businesses, but they didn't start, honestly, by going to school. They started by braiding hair or doing hair when they were in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and they charged people for it. And so they kind of slipped into an outlet that gave them money, that they realized that this could be a profession.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did they realize it could be a profession, but it's something that they were really passionate about, right?
Yeah.
And so they slipped into the beauty industry, and it was because they had a talent, they had an ability, they did it part-time, but it turned into full-time. That is something simple that I want to say thousands of women and men, because there are some barbers out there who actually fell into it that same way. But they realized they had a gift, they had a talent, they had a desire, and they didn't wait on schooling. They didn't wait on having everything set up perfectly.
Yeah.
They just kind of slipped into it.
Man, I got so many thoughts. You mentioned the word passion, so I want to talk about that too, because you may have passion but lack the skill.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be. I like how you ordered it first. They did something, started off as a hobby, but they were skilled at it. I would rather people focus in on what they're skilled at doing right now and get to passion later. I would rather you work yourself into passion.
Because it's about hustling right now.
It's about, yeah, man, you got to make money.
It's a grind moment.
Every person who is in their 20s, early 30s should be investing money right now. You should be in the stock markets. You should be saving. You should be investing. And so to hear me say that and then say, well, but I can barely make, rent. I can barely eat. I get it. I understand that. But you also can do something about it.
Yeah.
What we can't do is spend hours on social media.
Or wait for the government.
Lord knows you can't wait.
Because they're not going to help you.
No, they ain't going to help you.
They don't.
This ain't it. And they shouldn't. At the same time, it should be, I think there should be better policies that could help set our young people up in better ways, but that's another podcast. But for this one, I would say our challenge is to say, well, we can't wait for someone else to fix what I'm living. Like if I'm living in a predicament and it feels like failure, first you got to get over this idea of it being about failure. You are not a failure. You are more than a conqueror. You have gifts and talents and abilities that you need to hone in on. You got to develop that skill. I remember when I first started getting into music and I really wanted to be a recording artist. I mean, I was selling a few little music projects here or there, some album sales. And back then it was CDs, and I would sell some CDs. I'd do a concert and all that. But where I really was making my money, I learned how to produce, not just make my own songs. I learned how to run a recording studio.
Yeah, so you had a studio in the house.
I built it by hand.
Yep.
I learned how to mix and master. I learned how to record as an engineer because I recognized that selling the music wasn't making enough money to provide for my family. And even though music was my passion, I had to develop skill to be able to bring in clients. And then I had to be able to incentivize other musicians who knew other musicians who needed studio time, so I can build up enough clientele to where it wasn't a one and done thing.
Yeah.
So if we would invest time looking within and stop looking for the affirmation and the likes and the validation to come from outside of us, we need to start tapping into what we can do right now that can make some money. That is something that you can be skilled at, or you can develop the skill for it.
I think some of us are also trying to take the easy way out by copying and pasting what other people are doing. If you copy and paste what the path that somebody else is doing simply because they have a hint of your passion or what you're passionate about. In this age, there are thousands, millions of people doing exactly what you're doing, and your voice will be lower.
Right.
So you can't just do what they're doing. You got to understand that your voice is unique, and you, kind of like what you were saying, you have to take time to figure out what is unique about your voice and your approach to doing whatever, and then make that as loud as you can.
Yeah.
But just saying, oh, I like detailing cars. They're detailing cars. Let me do what they're doing. That's not going to work.
You need to look at an industry realistically right now. You need to look at an industry and say, does it supply demand? That's a need for people. You mentioned hair. People always going to need their hair done. Construction. Somebody's always going to need to build something. What are things that are very practical? And even if you don't want to work in the industry, if that industry is a solidified industry right now, and it supplies a need, a demand, then you need to find what you can do in that area where you can be really skilled.
Yep.
And you better get certified. You got to get really, really, really great at your craft. And you cannot do that when your focus is all over the place, or when you're depressed and struggling with anxiety, or just kind of living aloof. We heard the phrase a lot of times. I'm going to say it again. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. If you aim at nothing, you're just going to live just kind of aimlessly floating through life, and you're going to miss the target of what you were created and called and ordained to do. You have to be skilled. There's a verse of scripture, Daniel 6:3. It's one of my favorites, but it says, then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the satraps and all the rest of the people, because he had an excellent spirit in him. There is something about excellence that is just irreplaceable. It is, if you combine hustle with excellence, you become a force of nature in any industry that you're in. And excellence doesn't mean that you're perfect. It means that you do the best you can with the best that you have.
Listen, there's a lot of construction workers out there, but not all of them are excellent.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people out there that can do hair.
Mm-hmm.
You hear me?
Yeah.
But they ain't excellent.
Administrative work.
But
don't show up on time.
Excellence will set you apart.
Yes.
And like you were saying something, oh my gosh, I just have so much. Like our daughter, Brianna, the middle child, she got a musical theater degree, and now she's in New York. Musical theater, Broadway, is a very oversaturated market.
Mm-hmm.
And so she wanted to do that from the jump. I was like, boy, that's hard, is oversaturated, but she wanted to do it. I would say she took one of the things that we were telling all of our kids to do, especially early on, was if you're going to have social media, to use it for your benefit. So in other words, it's not just using it to see what everybody else is doing or use it as entertainment, but it's like to let it catapult your voice.
I mean, your skills should build your own brand. Mm-hmm. You are a brand. And that's what she did. She created her own, singing songs you don't usually hear black girls sing in musical theater. Yeah. She created that. And on TikTok, she's went viral several times. She got over 26,000 followers on there.
Yeah. But now, so again, back in the day, the way to get into a Broadway show was to audition, right? You have to stand in a long line.
Which she still does.
Yeah, you still got to do that. But because she created this niche within this oversaturated market, people are actually contacting her through her TikTok and asking her, hey, can you do this part? Hey, can you audition for this part? So it's saying, I know my voice. I know I'm unique. Mm-hmm. And it's not sitting there all day just kind of getting caught up in social media or what other people are doing.
No.
But it's really paying attention to who you are.
Absolutely. And you have, but that took a level of, number one, she actually is good at it. She's skilled at it. Mm-hmm. But she works hard at it. And at the same, so she has that natural ability, but then she accelerated that with college. And in her particular case, she also is taking extra classes for acting and dance. Like there's so much that she invested in her craft that even though she's young, this isn't like overnight success. This isn't just raw talent, was heard on the subway and now has a record deal. Like that can magically happen for a few, bro, but it's just not happening for everybody. Yeah. And so what you end up with is you'll end up with a person who wants to be a star 10 years past their prime and they still waiting tables wishing for their one opportunity. So some people experience that and you read these stories and it's just like, oh, that sounds.
Oh, one day that's me.
Yeah, it's this romanticized thing. And in the meantime, you're struggling. And the part that really sucks that I really can't stand is the algorithms. of your Zuckerbergs and all the rest of these that really have mastered the art of almost like lulling to sleep a whole massive amount of young people who don't know that there was a different way before Zuckerberg, before Facebook, before, Twitter and TikTok, before all the algorithms were so finely tuned to give you dopamine hits just being on the thing. We actually went outside.
Yeah. And we connected with people.
We connected with people. And here's where the connected with people is so important.
Yep.
Because if you want to increase your net worth, you have to increase your network. A lot of these jobs that people are being hired for right now, you're not getting it through, some job search engine or whatever case. By the time most of those jobs get posted, some insider found out about the job, word of mouth through the company. They're going to be hired for that position before somebody can even apply it. And at this point, a lot of those, online applications, I mean, some of your resumes ain't even making it to a real person because a lot of it's AI scanned. And so some of the PDFs, man, if they're not even right, or if the grids that you have on your resume are incorrect, it literally won't even make it into the pile to even be seen. And so it's like we're deceiving ourselves by thinking, I put 2,000 applications out today. I'm like, that's not enough, bro. You have to think differently now. Yeah. You got to build your network. You have to connect with other people, which means you have to make an effort to get off of your screen on your phone, unless you're using it to build face-to-face community.
Sure, setting up meetings.
On that thing. You're setting up meetings. You're getting to know people. The problem is you would have to go outside. The problem is you would have to work on your speaking skills. You would have to develop, I hate small talk. I can't stand people. I don't want to be around nobody. Like when that's your mindset,
you're believing a lot of baloney.
Yeah. And you're killing your opportunity to grow. And then you end up with hordes of people who are mad at the government. They're mad at each other. They're angry, and you're just wondering, why are people so cynical? Why do people have so much time to just be nitpicking and fighting each other?
No one is going to fight for you the way you need to fight for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no one's just going to, arrive at your doorstep and then say, hey, I've got the perfect plan for you. I've got, follow me. Like, no one's doing that. And even to the point where if you want to be in a relationship, same thing. You got to go out. You got to meet people. You got to network. You got to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
So like you were talking about building skill. And so one of the things that I just want to encourage people out there, that if you're wanting to build your skill, but you don't want to go to a traditional university, if you just Google unconventional schooling, right? If you just Google online programs, there are tons of certifications.
People still there's still trade schools.
Online schools that you can go to, your pace programs that you can take, and you'll still get the same degree. The reality is people don't care where you graduated from. They just want to know if you have the skill. Mm-hmm. People don't really care about your GPA. They just want to know, did you graduate? So and that's if the field that you're going into requires a degree. Because sometimes I can't believe I'm saying this, because I was that parent that was like, you're going to college and you're getting that degree. Now, I wouldn't even say my kids needed to go to school.
That's where some of the anger from the younger generation is.
Yeah,
because they've been sold this idea that if you just went to college and basically got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loans,
because
and you did all of this, then you can get the American dream. And now the American dream is so out of reach for them that they're bitter and angry behind it, and it's leaving a lot of them depressed. It's leaving a lot of them disconnected. They're angry, and so my heart to my younger generation is like, you're so valuable. You mean so much to us. You mean so much to the world. We need you. We need you to be all in on the best version of who you are. And we just want you to live with joy. We want you to live connected to community. We want you to hone in on your skills, your abilities. And we would love to meet with you, connect with you, talk with you, reach out to us, email us, click the link in the show notes and reach out to us so we can give you advice and wisdom. One of my passions is like talking to people and just helping them to discover what their strengths and abilities are and to think different about their vision. But I can guarantee you this, when your attention is caught up in things that don't nourish your soul, that don't enhance your personal vision, when you're listening to people promote an unrealistic pathway to success that's not real to what you're going through and probably isn't even real to what they did to get to where they are. I've learned that a lot of people online, and y'all should know this by now, but they lying. They're saying that they got this and they got that. I mean, at one point there was a whole segment of Instagram where people would rent cars just to take pictures in front of them,
or houses,
to get likes and stuff, and they didn't even own it. They didn't belong. They would lie and say that they were going on trips that they didn't go to. And with AI coming up, man, it's about to be a mess.
What would you say to the young person who is feeling helpless right now? Life has been lifing and it's just hard. What would you say their first step should be?
I think for me, you got to know your worth, not your worth that would be defined according to the standards of social media, man. You have to start thinking like if you got 24 hours a day and 12 to 16 of those hours could be committed to bettering yourself. What are you doing to develop your own skills and not living in the regret of, well, dang, the American dream was a lie. Okay. And now what?
Yeah. What are you going to do about it?
Now what you going to do? If you thought college was going to be the breakthrough, the industry has changed. Certain jobs are no longer available or probably will be extinct within the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
So you got to shift and you got to pivot and change course. It's okay. Like God knew AI was coming. He knew that this moment was coming where certain jobs would become extinct. It's not like God didn't have a plan in store for you. The Bible tells us that he had good works prepared for your life before you were ever born. Mm-hmm. And you are God's masterpiece. You're still his workmanship created in Christ Jesus. So it's not like you're alone. I think that I would hone in on, okay, well, what do I have in my hands? How can I develop these skills? And how can I become an asset to people around me that have needs? People still have needs. And wherever there's a need, that's a business.
Yeah. One of the things that I was going to say is don't be afraid to start small. Despise not the day of small beginnings. So like if you have an idea or you have a thought or if you have a product, or if you realize that you can meet a need, start small. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew and then get all this debt or get all of this equipment and overexert yourself to where it's just out of reach.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah. So start small. And then as you grow, both in your skill and in your customer base, and in your comfortability, I don't know if that's a word.
We know what you mean.
Comfortability.
No, you said it right the first time.
Okay. But once you...
Comfortability.
That word. Once you're comfortable, then you can expand. You can go to the next level. But don't try to do it all.
To your point, like, if I go back circa 2008, that we were leading our church. And we had a lot of young people who were getting married at that time. And so they needed to know how do I do marriage. So we decided to do a in-house workshop and we titled it Not Just Roommates. I had that idea popped up. I was like, this is cool. So we're going to do a workshop. I created my own like tips for the couples, but it was like 40 people in the room.
Yeah.
Out of our whole church. It wasn't this big, 2,000-3,000 people came in. It was 40 something people in the room.
Just being faithful over the few.
Yeah. And then it took off. People liked it. Next thing you know, we were like, well, let's do it again. And then eventually it was like, okay, I think we got a story. Let's write it down. And so I attempted writing my first book and wrote Not Just Roommates all them years ago. That turned into another workshop. Somebody attended that workshop that knew somebody else, networked. Then they knew somebody else. Next thing you know, they had us in on a bigger platform. That bigger platform turned into speaking on other major platforms. That then took off and became what led us to like 2017. Speaking on one of the largest stages that we had ever been on. At that time, I think that event that we spoke at was like 60,000 people total, 7,000 in-house, and about, the rest of them were watching online. We didn't do that overnight, but we did start where we were. Doing your own stuff is daunting, but there's a lot of authors who may be listening to this and you need to tell your story. There's so much available information online where you can find out how to write a book, but you start where you are. You don't need all the bells and whistles yet. You just need to start where you are. So I just want to encourage you, man, if you are feeling hopeless because of what's going on in society, in the job market, and the financial pressures, you're not crazy, but you're also not alone. You got help. You got gifts and talents. Don't give up. Don't succumb to the pressure of just capitulating because you're overwhelmed and that feeling of hopelessness that's creeping in that whispers doubt to you. Man, you gotta hope against all hope. So listen, peeps, if this has helped you, I want y'all to let us know. Make sure that you rate this podcast and leave us a comment. How are you going to apply this? Don't forget to share it with some people because somebody else around you needs to hear this. And you can always get resources from us at SeanandLanette.com. Love y'all.
See you later.